Hello, everybody. Welcome to another bonus episode of Incoming. I have an incredible interview today. It's part one of my interview with Don Boelling. Don is the president of the 390th Strategic Missile Wing Memorial Association, and that is because Don was, in fact, a missileer at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. He was one of the 4 men and women who would be in that launch command center with the missile, ready to turn the key if necessary. And I had, as you might imagine, a lot of questions for him about what it was like to be a missileer and what are some of the craziest things that happened to you down there. I think you're going to be pretty interested. But before we get to that, I have a question for you. We're getting dangerously close to releasing season 2 of our show proper with the stories and actors you've become accustomed to. So here's my question for you. Do you want trailers of upcoming episodes? Do you want me to make the next bonus episode kind of like a trailer palooza of some of the things we have coming up? Or do you prefer to be surprised? So I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that. Send me an email, david@incomingpodcast.com, or just comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or, I don't know, any Chicago Bulls message board, and let me know what you think. And I'll take that under advisement. In any event, you're going to be pretty psyched about what we're going to give you. But in the meantime, we're going to keep you entertained and informed with cool interviews like this one with Don Boelling. Part 1, take it away. My guest today is Don Boelling. Don is the president of the 390th Strategic Missile Wing Memorial Association, and he is a veteran of the American land-based Titan missile program. Don, welcome to the show. We're very happy to have you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I want to ask some questions about you to start out with. Where did you serve and for how long?
I served in Tucson, Arizona. There are 18 Titan II sites around there. I was stationed there from early 75 to 1980.
Okay. So that's pretty close to the end of the program, correct?
Yeah, the program ended in 84.
Okay. And how did you end up on this particular duty? Was it a thing you chose or a thing that they just plucked you out of the chorus line for? How did you end up at doing this job?
Well, I'd always been interested in missiles and aerospace since I was just a little kid. And I knew about the Titan II program in high school, and I thought, you know what, that sounds like a fun thing to do. So I actually went in guaranteed job. I picked that job and actually went into it and was able to go all the way through and make it through my enlistment doing that job.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Okay, so how old were you in that period, if you don't mind me asking?
I turned 18 on May 17th, 74, and my enlistment date was June 6th, 74.
Wow. So you were a very young man at the time?
Yes.
I assume you weren't married at that time?
No.
Okay. So tell me about what your life is like at the time you're serving on the base. Like, where did you live while you were in service?
First few years, I actually lived on base in a barracks. I had the advantage of having a room by myself because my roommate, so to speak, he had a place off base, but he was required to have a place on base, but was never there. The barracks was always fun because we always got together to do stuff, having beer parties out in the outside picnic area and stuff like that. So it was rather interesting. Then I got married, moved off base, and lived off base for about two and a half years before I actually departed the Air Force.
Okay. And so I want to know what your life is like while you're serving this particular duty. So you're living, let's start with the beginning. You're living in the barracks. And how often are you on site and actually working in the silo?
When you first go on missile crew of Titan, an actual on crew, you pull approximately 8 alerts a month. So there's a lot of downtime where you're not doing anything. And basically, you would pull a 24-hour alert and then have the next 2 to 3 days off.
Okay.
Typically, you would have sometimes a 4 or 5 day break. And then during that 4 or 5 day break, you would have a training day on base. But there was a lot of off time in that job, which was really an advantage for those that wanted to do extracurricular activities or go to school, get their degrees. So there was a lot of extra time. So it was actually pretty good duty.
And that extra time was more or less unscheduled. Like as long as you were fit for duty when you were called to your shift, you could sort of do whatever you felt like.
Pretty much.
That's a pretty good deal.
Yeah. And that's kind of one of the reasons I picked that job.
It's savvy. So who were the other men? And I guess since it was after 1974, there were women on duty too. Who were
Yes.
the other people who were on this job with you?
There were typically on a launch crew for Titan, there were 4 individuals. You had the commander, who was in charge of the missile complex, the deputy commander, who was in charge of communications and relief for the commander if he were becoming incapacitated. You had the BMAT, which is the ballistic missiles analyst technician, who was in charge of the actual missile, the launch electronics equipment, and so forth. And then you had the MFT, which is the facilities technician, which is responsible for basically heating, ventilation, plumbing, electrical, that type of stuff.
So did you serve as a 4-person crew, or were you being rotated in with other people doing those other jobs?
You typically are on your own, on the same crew.
Okay.
When people leave the military, or if they get promoted or move to another job assignment, you'll have people rotating in and out of your crew. I probably served on maybe 7 or 8 crews total, because I moved up from regular line crew to alternate command post crew, and then to instructor crew, and then to wing instructor crew. So I kind of moved around a little bit. I'm moving up in the chain of command, so to speak.
Naturally. Did you do all 4 of those jobs?
No, actually, I was just strictly the BMAT, the ballistic missile analyst technician.
Okay. And so the BMAT and the MFT were generally enlisted personnel.
Correct.
And the MCCC and the DCCC were officers.
Yes.
And so let's talk about the BMAT job. What did that job entail specifically?
The BMAT was responsible mostly for the missile itself, all the electronics, all the ground-based support equipment, like the guidance system, the on-site batteries and missile batteries. Let's see, the BVLC, which was a real important piece. That was the butterfly lock valve that prevents the crew from launching the missile, or anybody else from launching the missile if the site was taken over, without actual entering in a code that the crew did not have. That code was transmitted at the time if we actually did go to war. The BMAT was responsible for all of the electronics equipment, and then also as a backup for the DMCC, the deputy commander, in keeping the communications equipment functioning.
I mean, that's kind of a giant job for a 19-year-old to be responsible for.
Well, when I got on crew at age 18, my dad didn't believe it. It took him a while to realize that his son was pulling alerts at the largest missile that the military had at the time.
Yeah, I believe that. I have a 16-year-old daughter, and she's incredible, but I'm not sure that I want her controlling the butterfly valve just yet. I don't let her drive alone, so that's an entirely different category. So, how did interpersonal relationships affect a shift? You're in those quarters. I toured the Titan missile silo recently, and I got to see what it was like up close. not a lot of extra real estate in those things. So if you're with these 3 other people 24 hours at a time, how did interpersonal relationships affect that?
For me, I don't think I was ever on crew with anybody that we had a personal relationship that was bad. Every once in a while, you'll get somebody that just kind of wants to be a loner. You just kind of leave them alone. But for the most part, I always had really good crew members, got along with them. In fact, most of the former crew members that I was on crew with, I'm still friends with. We still communicate quite often. And we're going to have a reunion for the wing in October of this year in Tucson. And many of the former crew members I was on with are going to be there.
It's fantastic. But so you're with your crew, you're 3 people that you've become accustomed to working with, and occasionally some new person could be introduced because one of the people out of your 4 would have gotten promoted, moved on to some other duty.
Correct.
So I imagine there would be like a gentle breaking in process where you had to like assess a new person and see what frequency they vibrated on, like what it was like to be with those people for those extended hours.
Yeah, typically. One of the things that most of the crews did, and mine as well, if you get a newbie that just got on crew brand new in your crew, there's a lot of practical jokes that go on.
Okay, good. You remember any good ones?
Oh yeah. One of the good ones is trying to convince them that the site's haunted. And yeah,
I was there. That's an easy sell. Yeah.
And out in the missile silo, one of the major practical jokes is there's an actual phone out at the end of the cableway that looks like your standard wall phone. You pick up the little handle and it's got the little latch on it. And the primary crews would go, crew members would go out there and fill a milk carton full of water and just poke a small hole on it and put a bucket underneath and stick it on the latch. So after a little while, the phone rings and there's nobody out there, and the new guy, you're going, oh my God, we got a ghost or something, and the new guy kind of freaked. Just things like that.
I would expect nothing less. Since you started in 75, you wouldn't have a point of comparison. Was there anything unique about having women as part of the crew that had previously been all men?
Actually, I was on instructor crew when the first group of women on crew hit Davis-Monthan there in Tucson. So I had the pleasure of actually helping to train the first group of women to go on crew.
Oh, that's fantastic.
In the 390th. It was a mixed, I would say. There were really good performers, and then there were some that weren't quite so good. But that's not unusual with the men either.
Sure.
One of the unusual things with the women is that they had options that the men didn't, because they were told that if they didn't like it, they could just transfer out. Well, a lot of the guys didn't have that option. And some of the women did. Most of them hung on and did a terrific job. But there were a few that once they got on and saw what it was really about, they really didn't like it. One in particular, which was when she found out that a good portion of the job is sweeping, cleaning, wiping up hydraulic fluid, that type of thing, she wanted no part of it. So, yeah.
I don't blame her. I wouldn't be suited for that task either.
Well, and that was between an hour and 2 hours of our job when we pulled alert. Was the enlisted guys would be out in the silo, mopping, cleaning up hydraulic fluid. So there was, a lot of work.
That's
there.
part of it. Were there any hard guy types who resented having women added to the force?
At first there were. I think the area where the folks that had the most problem with it were the wives of the male crew members. There were some that basically had a real issue with their spouse going on alert for 24 hours in a silo, unchecked, I guess, with the women. And there were a lot of meetings and stuff with the wives to kind of get them over that feeling and get them used to it. I did pull alerts a couple times with a few of the females. As an instructor, if somebody was sick or whatever, you may have to fill in on an alert for someone else. So I did pull an alert with a few. One captain commander that I pulled alert with, she was an outstanding professional commander. Very, very, and I also worked with her in the trainer, given as an instructor, for their crew. She was outstanding performer.
That's fantastic to hear. All right, I'd like to learn a little bit now about what life was like on duty. Like, so when you pulled an alert, how that 24 hours broke down. So can you give me just like a rough idea about how it worked for the period of an alert?
Yeah. Well, right up front, for the most part, alerts were typically very boring, but with every once in a while, a huge amount of excitement when something happened. But
I would imagine, yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't happen often. Typically, we would meet in the morning at what's called a pre-departure building, and we would have a pre-departure briefing. All the crews would get together. The wing staff would give us the overall of the status of all of the different sites, any issues that might come up, and we'd also get world intelligence briefings if there's anything that was significant that we needed to know about.
So they did. They gave you some like geopolitical information about like, here's what's going on in a broad sense in the world right now.
Yes, if it was real important, we would get that, and then that typically lasted anywhere from 15 minutes to a half hour, depending on how much information there was, and then we all leave the building, go to our crew vehicles, which are parked outside. Head to several different places. The first stop would be the on-base kitchen to pick up our food to take with us. The second stop would be Central Security Control, where the commander would get his documents and stuff actually encrypted documents to get into the site, access documents. And then we would head out to the missile site. Once at the missile site, commander would have to go to the gate, phone, and request to come in, give the number of people, code access or whatever at the gate. And then we would head to the portal. The commander would go down by himself at the portal and actually authenticate into the missile complex. While he's doing that, the two enlisted guys go topside and check all the equipment topside. And when I was in, we had cooling towers up until later when those were pulled out. We had cooling towers. We have to inspect the surveillance systems, look for any desert animals that might have gotten in where they're not supposed to be. my first confrontation with the rattlesnake was about on my fourth alert, so that was interesting.
Wow.
Yeah. Scared the crap out of me because I'd never seen one before in the wild. So, just things like that. We checked the perimeter fence to make sure there was no issues there. And then we go back to the portal. Commander had already been done. We put all our stuff on the elevator and head down into the missile silo. Once we get into the control center, we do what's called changeover. And the changeover is the commander and the crew get status from the previous crew of anything that might be of issue. The commander will sign for the site, and we literally take over. For the next 2 to 4 hours, depending on how much stuff there was to do, we would do what's called daily shift verification, and that's going through and checking all the equipment. We checked stuff in the control center. All of the major electronics, electrical, heating, and ventilation is checked in the control center through a checklist. And then once that's done, we work our way out to the silo and do the same thing in the silo from top to bottom.
Seems like
what I mentioned before, all the cleanup.
All the cleanup, right? I mean, it seems like we think about that job as being ready to turn the key, but primarily the job is to maintain it in a state of readiness. So
Correct.
that everything is ship shape and ready to go should it be called upon.
Yep. Well, after daily shift verification, usually about then it's time for lunch. And we would basically have lunch. And then from that point on, it's pretty much just hanging out. And
I was going to say, I mean, like, you don't sit there on alert the whole time, right? Like, you spend the first 2 to 4 hours or whatever it is, making sure everything's the way it's supposed to be. And then you got 20 hours to kill until you're relieved.
pretty much. 2 people have to stay on level 2 at all times.
Okay.
So typically during the day, when we're on daily shift verification and the 2 enlisted guys are out in the silo, of course, it's the 2 officers that are on site. But in the evening, when we usually do a split sleep shift, one half of the crew goes to bed for 4 hours, then gets up for 8, and then the second, and then goes back to sleep for 4 hours. And the other team does the 8-hour shift. And every other alert, you swap who does the 8-hour, that gets to do the 8-hour shift. But at all times, there will be at least 2 people on the control on the level 2 of the control center.
So so the listeners understand. So in the facility itself, level 2 is where the command module stuff is, and where the access to the missile and the silo are.
Correct.
Upstairs is where the
bedroom and
mess
kitchen
is, and the bunk beds, and downstairs is where the computers and the hatch are. We're going to get to the hatch later. But
Yes.
yeah. So level 2, meaning those are the people who are there to push the buttons. I mean, although I imagine if there's an alert, everyone's waking up.
Yes. Well, level 2 is what we call in the military a no-loan zone. In other words, there has to be at least 2 people present at all times. During our sleep shifts, it would be 1 officer and 1 enlisted. And then when we swap, it'd be the other officer and other enlisted.
Okay, so how did you pass the time?
We had a TV set, but back in those days, if you were at a good site, you got 3 channels. If you were at a bad site, maybe 1 or 2.
Even that far underground, you were able to get some broadcast TV.
Yeah, we actually had a TV antenna up on topside to come down. Later on, they actually put in VCRs and stuff toward the end of my enlistment, which made things a little bit better. But
That's
a lot of times,
high-end 1980 technology. I remember it well.
Yeah. Well, we had, we play games. We had board games out there, cards, a lot of reading. One of the things that we had to have every month, we were highly trained and had to go through a lot of training. So we would have, they would give us training packages that we'd have to complete. We would do those on site. And again, a lot of folks would be taking college courses and stuff and be studying out at the site for that. Me, I slept a lot.
As any man of your age would do.
That's right. Yeah.
But I mean, to do that job at your age, you would have had to take like a crash course engineering degree, essentially, to be able to understand how all that equipment worked and to be able to assess whether or not it was in good condition. I mean, maybe it was specialized to just those specific things, but we're talking about a massive amount of electronic and electric equipment.
Yes. I've always been good with electronics and electrical. Even in high school, I was really good at it. I fixed my first TV set at age 12. Wow. So I myself and like the really good facilities technicians and BMATs were individuals like myself that had an aptitude for those kind of things. And you had to take a pretty heavy duty test in order to get into the jobs. When we went through almost a full year of training, when I got out of basic training in 1st of July of 74, I went to Shepherd Air Force Base for almost, 7 or 8 months of 8 hours a day of nothing but training of all that equipment and facilities. how to troubleshoot, how to repair, things in emergencies, the whole works. And then from there, went to Vandenberg Air Force Base for several months to actually go through launch training to learn how to do the launch in simulators and such. So there's almost a full year of 8 hours a day of training just to get before you even get on crew.
It's an incredible amount of work, and also impressive that you were able to do it all. I have to imagine that some people washed out of that program. That's
a lot of people washed out.
Right?
In my class of 8, only 5 of us made it through. And out of the 5, I know at least one in my group that went to Davis-Monthan with me washed out of upgrade training. You have to go through a month and a half of upgrade training on site before you can actually go on crew. One of the individuals that was in my class washed out there. And I know one individual that washed out that went to another base that was in my class at Shepherd. So out of the 8 that went through my class, only 4 of us actually made it on crew.
Well, I mean, good. I think that's right. Better that we have the people equipped to do that job, do the job. We don't want anybody skating by.
Yeah, there's pretty high standards.
Okay. Were there readiness drills?
Yes. Not typically on site. You would have every once in a while what's called a stand board, which you had to have at least once a year, a stand board evaluation, where the stand board crews, which are elite crews that were part of evaluations, they would literally come out to the site, hit you unannounced, and then basically take you through all the operations at the site, all the things that you're supposed to do, and test you on knowledge, run you through simulated drills of actual launch and malfunctions. They would say, okay, you're running this, you're in DEFCON 1, going to launch, and all of a sudden you get this light up. What are you going to do? And then you would simulate actually going out and fixing it.
High pressure.
Very high pressure, because it doesn't take much to fail. So you had actually a minor error and major errors, and you can only get 2 major errors and you were done. And if you got a bunch of minor errors, you were done. So they kind of added up. I actually enjoyed the stand board evaluations, because they were a good test of how well you could do your job. But if you failed one, you were basically scrutinized and you were taken off of crew duty until you could pass.
So there weren't drills in the sense of the 4 people in the silo would think, this is an alert, we have to go through a launch sequence, and then at some time down the line they'd say, this was just a drill.
No. Okay. That's toying with possible error, and they never went that far.
Naturally.
However, on a stand board evaluation at the site, the whole complex had what's called a missile fault locator, and you could activate that, and they would actually have you turn keys, and the missile fault locator would literally simulate at the site an actual launch without actually launching, and that actually tests all of the systems without actually going into an actual launch sequence.
Okay.
So that's one thing they would have you do. We also had a simulator that was for training, that you would go through all of the, like a real world situation as well.
But nonetheless, you knew you were in a simulator.
Yes.
When it was happening. So the stakes are a little different. So that kind of begs the next question is, what was your level of stress like when you're on shift? You're on alert for 24 hours. Were you, I imagine the first few weeks, you must have been like, it could pop off at any time. And then 3 years in, you're like, well, another 20 hours of watching Candid Camera and reading my book.
Yeah, pretty much. When you first get on crew, your biggest fear is making a mistake and embarrassing yourself with your other crew members. And you want to learn as much as possible from the crew members that you're on with, because they know a whole lot more than you. If they don't, in training, they can teach you everything but what it's really like in the real world.
Yeah.
So there is a little bit of stress at first. Out at the site, there's not a lot of stress. It was pretty calm, unless you had an issue. When I was on alerts, I had a couple of fires. And at first, when you have a fire actuator out in the silo, it goes through your mind. Is it a major one? Is it a minor one? Or what am I going to have to do? And you have to don oxygen equipment and go out there and fight the fire. That is very stressful. Fortunately, because basically there's only one exit out of the silo, so that you have to worry about that. So the two fires that we had were small electrical, motor fires, fan motor fires and stuff. So it's not a big deal. But at the time, it can be somewhat stressful. The most stressful alert that I had was I was actually pulling alert when the embassy in Iran was taken over. And we went to a higher DEFCON, and we're told there wasn't going to be a crew changeover, and we were stuck out there for several days. So that was a pretty stressful alert.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And so you been briefed about that situation before you went in? That
No.
I guess because we couldn't anticipate that the embassy was going. So
no, that happened while we were there. We get an alert message went to go to higher DEFCON, and we're wondering what the heck's going on. And at the same time, we're getting messages from the wing command post what had happened and why we're going to higher DEFCON. And it was somewhat stressful. And then they came out and said, and I was at an alternate command post site. There were two alternate command posts for each wing. Mine was the primary, and then there was a secondary. Our job was to take over command of the wing and communications if we actually went to war and topside command was obliterated. So we were getting more communications than the normal crews. So it was a little bit stressful what was going on at that time.
a little bit stressful.
Yeah.
I'm freaking. It was 35 years ago. I'm freaking out just hearing about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Fortunately,
45 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Fortunately, the nuclear crews, we were kind of told, not a chance we're going to launch against Iran, but we were more worried about what the rest of the world was doing.
Sure.
Yeah, at that time, I think the worst panic for us, no joking aside, was when we figured out that, hey, we only brought food for 24 hours. We're going to be here for 3 days. So,
they didn't have a bunch of MREs down in the basement for you guys?
we didn't have MREs back then. We had the leftover Korean War sea rations, and I was the one. I was sitting there. I looked at my commander and said, "What are we supposed to do for food?" And he goes, "Oh, good point." So we called the command post, and they said, "Oh, we'll get back to you." And then they came over and alerted all the crews to break open the sea rations, and they were terrible, to tell you the truth.
That does not surprise me. That is the least surprising information you've given me in this conversation so far.
There were a few that weren't so bad, but for the most part, I mean, the cinnamon rolls and what looked like a tuna fish can, you could have played hockey with those, just like that. And the worst part was when we got back to base, they had the nerve to charge us for them. So,
oh my God, that is outrageous.
Yeah, we had to pay. We had to keep track of how many we ate, and we got charged for them.
I'm sending a letter to the Ronald Reagan Library about that as soon as this is over. Yeah. Okay, I want to move on to another thing, but before we do, I want to talk about the hatch. So I got a little special dispensation and got to go downstairs, which is not on the tour. And apart from all the kind of like the nerve center of all the electronic machines that control all the equipment, there's a big metal hatch in the door, and not on the wall. And my understanding is that existed in the case that you had to launch, that you were supposed to sequester in that space for 30 days or something like that. and then crawl through the hatch, which led to a tunnel of an indeterminate length. I was told it was a couple of miles, and then emerge somewhere else.
Now, the tunnel was actually the intake shaft for the control center, so it went directly up topside.
Okay.
There was no other tunnel.
Important clarification from an expert. This is why I'm asking.
No, that hatch, we had enough food and stuff down there to last for, typically 30 to 60 days, basically, depending on which site. The alternate campo sites had a little bit more food. Sites that also house the security teams, 1 out of every 3 sites, the security team, that was their home site while they were there. So they stayed there. We had more food at those sites as well. If we had gone to war and had to use that hatch, it takes a long time to open that thing because you're opening it with a ratchet, and it's not real easy. I have actually opened one to test it out, and I will say it took 45 minutes to get that thing open. And that was with 2 of us taking shifts, because after about 10 minutes of ratcheting thing, you're pretty darn tired. But then you go down a small tunnel, and then basically take a ladder and climb all the way up to the top. And there's a grate at the top that covers the intake shaft, and it can only be opened from the inside. So you open that up, and then you can actually climb out.
This may be me romanticizing it, but I would have to think that there's something sort of existential about being in that place and looking at that hatch and thinking, I could be in a situation where I'm spending a month in here and then emerging from this hatch and ladder and through the grate into a world that has irrevocably changed. Is that a kind of thing that ever occurred to you, or were you just sort of like, this is the gig, there's the hatch, there's the machines? How much of that were you contemplating?
I think every crew member at one time or another actually thinks about that. One of the folks that I mentioned that didn't make it through upgrade training at the site that was in my class, when he actually got out there, started seeing the site, realizing what kind of damage the missile could do, how big it was, that's when he decided, I don't want to do this anymore. So you can't fault a person for that, for feeling that way.
Sure.
Because that's a pretty big responsibility. I think every crew member had to think about that. But I don't know too many that actually dropped out, just a few. And it's something, it's no different than a pilot that's carrying a whole bunch of bombs to bomb a city. You
absolutely,
you got to think about those things and come to realize that that's your job, and you may have to live with the consequences afterwards.
So that's part 1 of my interview with Don Boelling. Don, thank you so much for your time. If you want to learn more, go to Don's website, which is Titan, the numeral 2, ICBM.org. And there's lots of pictures and stories and information on there that'll blow your mind. Take my word for it. Once again, hit me up. Let me know what you think about the trailer idea, because I'll make you some trailers. And we're just so grateful to all of you for listening to the show, for telling people about the show. I want to hear from you. Please email me questions, comments, ideas. Ask me to call you. I'll put you on the show. Trust me. David at incomingpodcast.com. We can't wait to share season 2 with you. It's coming up, I promise. Thanks for your patience. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.